Hello and welcome to ReviewFlow. I'm your host Casper, and today I'll be reviewing for you the iPad Air. Now, I did an unboxing and impressions video on this not too long ago, which was very information heavy. And if you want that information, I'll annotate it right here, the video. But this video is going to be less information heavy and more about opinion, what I think of the iPad Air as a general product, and whether or not I think you should upgrade from what you already have and so on. And I've had it for a while now, and I can sort of give you a feeling of not just how it scores in benchmarks and such, but how much faster it actually feels and how much more you're actually going to get out of it. So that's what this video is going to be about, and I hope you enjoy it. There are two questions I get asked all the time about the iPad Air. Number one comes from people who are very techy, and they ask, how fast is it? What's interesting about these people is that they don't want to know how fast it feels. They want to know how fast it is, how much it scores in apps like Geekbench and 3D Mark. And as I mentioned this in my impression video, it scores around 2300 in Geekbench and 60 frames in most everything in 3D Mark, right? Incredibly impressive. Pretty much identical to an Intel Core 2 Duo at around 2.5 gigahertz. So that's extremely nice, right? But how fast does it actually feel? Now, this is where it gets interesting, because I think for the average user, you're not really going to notice a difference between, let's say, the third generation iPad, or even iPad 2 because of the lower resolution, and the iPad Air. That being said, it's a lot faster. But if you don't use it, you're just going to waste clock cycles, right? However, if you are a power user, you are going to feel a difference. But it's not going to blow you away, because no software really utilizes the clock cycles yet. They don't use the A7. They don't use the A7 CPU and GPU performance, right? They don't use the DDR3 memory speed proper either. They get boosted by the fact that the hardware is faster, but they're not utilizing all they can from it, right? Same we saw when the iPad 2 came out, that a lot of software didn't actually run as fast as it could because it wasn't multi-thread, right? Even iOS 7 doesn't even feel upgraded for this new software, even though it is upgraded for 64 bits, obviously. It doesn't feel like it's been optimized for the CPU yet, and there are actually glitches that you're going to find on 64-bit processing devices that you are not going to find on other devices, although a lot of it has been sorted out in the system software that we're at right now. But yeah, if you're thinking about buying it for the speed, you need to be a power user. You're not going to find much of a speed difference if you're just a casual user. Now moving on, the second question I get a lot is from more normal people, if that's not too offensive, and that is regarding the weight and the form factor, because obviously it's a lot, well, it's not a lot thinner, it's a lot lighter, and the bezel has been decreased a good bit, but not, it's not gone. And so people ask you, how does it feel? How does it feel to hold it? And so on, right? And obviously you can go to any store and try to hold it, but you're not going to know how it feels on a day-to-day use, how much you feel the difference, right? And this is what I'm going to say to this. I don't know if it's just my hands that have this problem, because I can't even hold, like I feel my fingers kind of hurt a bit when I hold the iPhone 5 as well. But I don't really feel that I can rest my fingers on the back as nicely as I could with the third generation iPad. And I think this is due to the fact that it is less curved, right? That you don't have your hands curved so that your fingers can rest easily. That being said, I don't feel it's a big problem, because it's so much lighter. I can move my hands around, like I can move my hands more freely without getting too much weight on one side, and sort of renew my position so that my fingers don't get too uncomfortable. And this might be just a problem I have, I don't know. Another thing which I will demonstrate is regarding the bezel of the iPad. As you can see, the bezel is much thinner. If I turn on the screen, it's going to be easier. As you can see, the bezel is much thinner, especially on the sides, right? So you're thinking, well, I can't have my fingers, I can't get a proper grip on it without touching the screen, right? That sounds like a problem, doesn't it? If you're on, let's say, a website like Apple's front page here, not front page, but front page, the start page, and you have a grip out here, and you want to use the other finger, it zooms, right? Doesn't it? Well, there's actually some pretty intelligent software here that they moved on from the iPad Mini. The iPad Mini had this when it launched, and obviously this has it on its launch, but the older full-size iPad didn't have it because of the thicker bezel. But it is some intelligent software that notices when you have your finger as a grip, and it makes it so that it doesn't recognize this finger as a touch input, but rather a grip input. Well, not a grip input, but just a grip. So it doesn't take it as input. It just lets you have your finger there, which is extremely nice. But it does fail sometimes, thinking it's input when it's not. It's rare, but it happens. So something to consider. Although I don't think it detracts from the form factor. I think the form factor is a definite improvement, and I don't think anyone will ever agree with that. Disagree with that, I mean. But a third thing I want to touch on that I don't really get asked a lot and that no one seems to have really picked up on is the battery life. And this is probably due to the fact that Apple says it remains at the 10 hours mark. Apple claims no difference from the 3rd generation, 4th generation iPad, the iPad 2 to this. They claim the same 10 hours. And that's true. For the most part. And now you might be thinking that I'm going to say but and then something negative. But I'm actually going to say something positive. And that is, if you don't use it, for something intensive, air quotes, intensive in this case meaning a fifth, a tenth of what it can do, But if you don't use it for, let's say you have it playing music on standby mode, right? It's locked, the screen's locked, and you're just playing music from iTunes, right? You're gonna experience more than the 10 hours more than 10 hours you experienced with the older iPad. You're going to experience a performance, an increase in battery life. And now you might be thinking, why is this? This is because the A7 can throttle down its clock speed, and thereby the voltage needed to run it. Way more than the A5X and the A6X could. So that on lower usage, it goes way lower in battery usage, right? And the battery is smaller in this. So it means that if on normal usage, even though the A7 uses less power, the battery is smaller, so you're still going to get the 10 hours for the most part. Now that being said, it also goes the other way around. So if you're using it really intensely, you're going to draw the battery faster than the older iPads. But there's nothing that draws it that intensely yet. So generally, you're actually going to see a slight bit of battery improvement. So that's another positive. Now, what's my conclusion with all of this? My conclusion is that it doesn't feel dramatically faster. It's dramatically thinner and lighter. But if you're not a power user, you're not really going to notice many of these things. It's not necessarily as revolutionary as Apple will have you think it is, but it is a huge step forward. I prefer the full-sized iPad, but quite honestly, I think that most people would benefit more from getting an iPad mini with Retina display, which is essentially a condensed version of this, the same CPU chip, of course less heatsink surface, so it might throttle down, but that's not, I don't see that happening. And the iPad Mini with Retina display is going to be pretty much identical hardware-wise to this thing, except smaller. So if you don't need / want the full-sized screen, the 9.7 inches, and you can go with 7.9 inches, then I would suggest you the iPad Mini with Retina display. Now that being said, this is a brilliant tablet. I think that the iPad Mini with Retina display and the iPad Air are currently the two best tablets on the market. And I'm not just saying that because I love Apple. I'm saying that genuinely. But if you already have an iPad, what then? If you already have a 3rd generation iPad, if you already have a 4th generation iPad, you have an iPad 2, or even an Android tablet or something like that you're happy with, I don't necessarily want to say that you should upgrade. If you're happy with what you've got, I don't necessarily see you getting so much more out of this. You will get more out of it, probably, right? It's fast. I think it's the fastest tablet on the market still, but I know for a fact it was when it came out. It has an incredible display that's a wee bit better than the 4th/3rd generation iPad, which had the same resolution, but this has better colors, a little bit brighter too. Camera system is okay. It's good for a tablet, right? Which is probably the best you can get on a tablet, but tablets don't really need good camera systems for the most part. So how much that matters to you, I don't really know. But what I'll say is this: I don't personally think that you should upgrade from a 3rd generation, 4th generation iPad to this. If you have an iPad 2, I'd be on the fence about it. Or if you have an equivalent Android, right? But if you're going out and buying a new iPad, I would not even consider the iPad 2. Consider the iPad Mini, the iPad Mini with Retina display, and the iPad Air, okay? And, lean towards iPad Mini with Retina display or iPad Air. I know the iPad Mini with Retina display is more expensive than the iPad Mini is, but you're getting quite a lot more for that money. You're essentially skipping 2 generations of CPU and GPU chips by going with the Retina display model, and you're getting the M7 co-processor and all this good stuff that's actually going to increase the battery life. And what most people don't actually know is that the iPad Mini with Retina display comes with stereo speakers, whereas the iPad Mini comes with mono speakers. And I don't know how much you're going to use the built-in speakers, but that's also something to consider. Now I'm talking way too much about the iPad Mini, but I want to sort of compare all the iPad models to sort of let you know what you're getting into. But if you are buying a new iPad, consider this and the Mini models. Don't consider the iPad 2. If you already have an iPad, don't jump into it thinking it's going to be a dramatic improvement, because it is a huge step forward in terms of, Apple's competition. How well they are at how good they are at competing with the other companies out there, especially in terms of form factor. But it doesn't reinvent the wheel. It's not an all-new tablet. It's just a new iPad. And it's not an S model, air quotes, because the iPads don't follow the S rhythm. But the 3rd generation and 4th generation was sort of just building on top of the iPad 2. And of course everything's building on top of each other, but this is trying to do something new, and it is sort of succeeding at it, but it's not reinventing the wheel. So that's my conclusion. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Hopefully doing something exciting.